Hi students, in today's video we are doing the homework questions from assignment 2.3, chapter 2, equations and inequalities. Right, let's look at question 1. Question 1, you're just asked to solve the following inequalities and then to represent the solution sets on separate number lines. Right, if you look at 1c, basically the quadratic expression has been factorized into the linear factors. So there is no need to do any factorization, and there's actually don't need to expand it and then you carry out the factorization because it's already been factorized for you. So we just let it equals to 0. We let the quadratic, the linear factors equals to 0 so that we can find the x-intercept, and then you will realize that the coefficients of x squared is 2, which is a positive value. Hence the quadratic curve would be a U-shaped curve. Right, so let's label the two x-intercept, which is negative 3 over 2 and 2. And then we need to determine which portions of the curve that we're interested in. Right, basically your x-axis acts like a divider. The x-axis is when your y is equals to 0. Okay, your x-axis is when y is equals to 0. Hence, if your curve is above the x-axis, it's when this part here is, or this part here, it's when the values of y is more than 0, positive. And then at the bottom here, this part of the curve is when the values of y is less than 0. Right, so let's go back to the quadratic inequality, and you can see that I actually highlighted it in pink. That means we want our y values to be more than 0. Right, so it can be either the first curve that I've highlighted or the second curve. Right, but the answers for the inequalities will come from the x-axis, because you're actually, if you look at you, it makes sense, because if you look at your inequalities, the variable given is in terms of x. Therefore, your answer have to be in terms of x. So hence the answer will come from the x-axis. So let's look at the first curve. So the x value, the corresponding to the first curve, will be x more than 2, highlighted in green. Then for the second curve, highlighted in green also, it will be x less than negative 3 over 2. Right, so if you look at the situation like that, if you have two separate curves, that means we have two sets of inequality. Let's look at part E. Right, part E, we can see that it is not factorized for you. Right, so we have to do the factorization, carry out the factorization. Oh, sorry, then we have to draw the number line. Yes, you have to represent your solution sets on the number line. You will see that it's actually a empty circle because it does not include 2. Likewise, for the other one, it's also an empty circle because it does not include negative 3 over 2. Okay, let's go back to part E. So we're just saying that part E, the quadratic expression given, it's not factorized. So we have to factorize it. Right, so the common factor will be x. Factorize it, you will get x bracket x minus 4. Right, so the coefficients of x squared, it's 1. So we'll be getting a U-shaped curve again. So let's draw our U-shaped curve. And the two x-intercept will be x equals to 0, x equals to 4. The next thing is to determine which portions of the curve we're interested in. Yes, and here we're actually interested in the y coordinates to be a negative value. So we're interested in the curve which is below the x-axis. Okay, the curve that's below the x-axis, that will give you y coordinates to be negative. And the answer will come from the x-axis. So the corresponding answer for y less than 0 will be between 0 and 4 inclusive, right? And if you were to look at the curve, that's only, you see, there's only one portions of the curve that's been highlighted, only one portions. Hence, your inequalities only one set is greater or equal than 0, less than or equal than 4. Unlike the first example that we did is two separate parts of the curve, so you have two sets of inequality. Here we're only talking about one part of the curve which is joined together. Hence your inequality, it's just one set. And to represent it on the number line, alright, we draw the number line. You will see that it's actually a solid circle because it means it can include the value 0 and also include the value 4. So hence the when you draw the number line, you're using solid circle to represent the two endpoints. Right, let's look at 2a and 2b. So the concepts for solving quadratic inequalities are relatively easy. You just have to bring all the terms to the left hand side, factorize it, determine the shape of the curve, right, and then identify the portions that you want. Is it more than 0 or less than 0? And then find the corresponding values of x. So let's look at 2a, right? So we need to factorize, expand it first. You need to expand it because basically your right hand side is not 0, right? You have to make your right hand side equals to 0. Therefore, you need to expand the left hand side first and then bring everything to the left hand side, make the right hand side 0, and then factorize your left hand side into the two linear factors. Okay, so next thing is that since the coefficients of x squared is 1, so we're talking about a U-shaped curve. So let's draw a U-shaped curve. And then we can put down your two x-intercept, which is -1 and 3. The next step is identify whether if you want it to be y more than 0 or y less than 0. And that is when you look at, yes, the inequality given, which we're interested in y less than 0, which is below your x-axis. Because the x-axis, the equations for the x-axis is y equals to 0. So above the x-axis is y more than 0, below it is y less than 0. Okay, in this case here, what we are saying is y less than 0. We're interested in getting the y values to be less than 0. Okay, so what's the corresponding values? So there's only one curve that we have shaded, one curve. So the answer will come from the x-axis, which is between -1 and 3. So we can draw the number line, and of course we use empty circle because it does not include -1 and 3. Okay, let's look at part B. Right, applying the same concepts, bring everything to the left hand side, factorize it into two linear factors. Okay, draw your quadratic curve, U-shape again because the coefficients of x squared is +1. Right, put down your two x-intercept, which is -2 and 6. Identify the region you're interested in, which is this time here you're getting y more than 0. You want your positive y, hence is above the curve you're interested in, is above the x-axis. So there are two curves that I have highlighted here. So because there are two curves that I've highlighted here, you will get two sets of inequality. So the first one is x less than -2. The second one is x more than 6. Right, so you can draw the number line. In this case here, again, we use empty circle because it's not inclusive of -2 and 6. Right, so if you have looked carefully at the past examples we have done, all the 4 examples we have done, you would observe that we're getting all the time a U-shaped curve because the coefficients of x squared is positive. So what happens if you are given -x squared plus 4x plus 12 more than 0? That means the coefficients of x squared is a -1. In this case, you're not getting a U-shaped curve anymore. It's actually N-shaped. So I would advise folks, if you are given a quadratic inequality where the coefficients of x squared is negative, always convert it to a positive. And how do you do it? You just multiply everything throughout by -1. And because you're multiplying everything by -1, you have to flip the inequality sign. That happens only when you're dealing with inequalities. Alright, So when you do that, you actually convert it into a U-shaped curve. So you just have to remember one type of curve, the U-shaped curve. You know, you don't have to remember what N-shape, U-shape, what happened, which region to take, right? So if you're given a inequality with the coefficients of x squared is negative, multiply every terms by -1 and then flip the inequality sign to get a U-shaped curve. And then you can just apply that the methods, the skills we have learned for the first 4 examples we have done. All right, so now let's look at a problem sum. Right, so this one here is not exactly related to quadratic inequalities. Yeah, this is more like quadratic factorization. Okay, if you look at the questions, y represent the number of books that you can sell after a certain days after a book launch, and then there's equations for you to calculate. So you ask to find the least number of days it takes to sell 104 copies of the book. Right, so what we can do is that you can just let y equals to 104, okay, and then you equate it, let d squared minus 5d plus 80 equals to 104. Bring everything to the left hand side, you end up getting a quadratic equations, which usually what do you do when you get the quadratic equations? You can just factorize it, and then you end up getting two values, which d equals to 8 or d equals to -3. But d represents number of days, and since we can't have a negative days, since we all know that d has to be more than 0, so d equals to -3 is rejected. Hence, the minimum number of days to sell 104 copies of the book will be 8 days. Right, so this one is rather straightforward. Right, let's look at question 4. Question 4 is a question involving projectile motion. Right, so what happened is that you throw something in the air, and then this object will be at a certain height above the ground at a certain timing. And there is equations to measure the height of the object at a certain timing. So if you're going to draw a diagram to represent this motion, this is how it looks like. On the x-axis it would be labeled t, on the y-axis will be h, right? And we know that t is a positive value. So when t is 0, if you look at the equation, this is the equation given. Right, so when you substitute t to be 0, you will get height 48. So what happened is that the object is at 48 meter above the ground before it was being thrown in the air. That is t equals to 0. Right, so probably it's someone holding it in the hand, and then you imagine that we throw the ball up to the air, and then you will reach the highest point, and then you'll come down to the ground. Right, so what happened is, if you look at part 1, we want to find the range of values of t for which the height of the object is above 384. So imagine that the object is here. So what we're saying that this height is 384. Right, so this object will go move to the highest point and come down again, and it will reach a second timing where it is 384 meter above the ground. So at this part here, this portion here is where the height is more than 384. Okay, this portion here where the height is more than 384, and we're supposed to find the range of values of t. So the range of values of t will be from here to here, which is from here to here. Okay, so basically this is how we can look at the questions using a diagram. So remember what Mr. Poya says, that one of the way to solve the problem is to use a diagram. All right, so what are the concepts involving this question? All right, we want the height to be more than 384, and you're given the equations of the height to be negative 16t squared plus 160t plus 48. We let it be more than 384. Okay, the next step is just bring everything to the left hand side to make sure the right hand side is 0. And then we're going to multiply by -1 throughout so that we make it a U-shaped curve. Right, so when you multiply everything by -1, it's very important to remember to flip the inequality sign. So from more than, it has to become less than. And then the next step is to factorize 16 out. And divide both sides by 16. If you're dividing with a positive number, you do not have to change the inequality sign. It still remains as less than. And since this is a t, the coefficients of t squared, it's 1. It's a U-shaped curve. Before that, we need to factorize it. Draw the U-shaped curve. Okay, write down the t-intercept, sorry. In this case here, it will be t equals to 3. You just let t minus 3 equals to 0. Get t equals to 3. Let t minus 7 equals to 0, get t equals to 7. Right, so the next thing is that the x-axis, if we were to remember, represent y equals to 0. We are interested in getting a negative y values. So the curve, the part of the curve we're interested in is below the x-axis. And for that, the corresponding t values, I keep saying x, corresponding t values will come from here, which is between 3 and 7. All right, so this is how you solve this question. Right, so for part 2, it's slightly more challenging because you need to explain to whether the object can reach 1,000 meters above the ground. Right, so what we are saying is that the concepts involved here is, if you're talking about whether it can reach 1,000 meters, that means we're talking about the maximum height the object can reach above the ground. So if you were to recall, if we need to find maximum minimum values, what's the concept involved? Yes, we can use the completing the square method. We can complete the square for height, and then we can find the maximum or the minimum values that the object can reach. Right, so to apply completing the square, first thing first is to make the coefficients of t squared be 1. So in this case here, we need to factorize -16. Right, and then if you have forgotten how to do completing the square, just refer to the earlier video. Right, we take the coefficients of t, which is -10, divide by 2, bracket it, square it, you add, and then you minus. Then the next step is this 3 terms here will collapse into this. And how do I get -5? -5 is just basically -10 divided by 2. So it is important, if the coefficients of t is negative, there's a negative there, it's important to put a negative there, because whatever inside the bracket here will be this guy here. Right, and then you can simplify this term, which will gives you 100 divided by 425. Then you multiply your -16 into your h square bracket, and then you will end up getting okay, so we need to do some explanation. So what is explanations that we need to do? Yes, first of all, recognize that when we square something, it's always equal to 0 or more than 0. If you multiply with the negative number, then the inequality sign has to change from more than to less than or equal. And then you're going to add 448 to both sides. So from there, we can see that the maximum height is 448. Right, so since the maximum height of the object, that Since the maximum height the object can reach is only 448, it is not possible for the object to reach a height of 1000 meters above the ground. So this is one method of solving it using completing the square, which is really very useful. Hence, you must go and master the skill of completing the square. Second method that we're going to use here is to see if there's any intersection point, right, between the h equals to negative 16t squared plus 160t plus 48. That means there's a curve, right? If there's any intersection point between the curve and h equals to 1000 meter, right? So we're going to form equations, okay, form equations in terms of t. So if you were to recall, we have done something like that before. Okay, we go on to find the discriminant for this equation. If there is, if the value of the discriminant is positive, more than 0, means there are two real and distinct roots. So hence, if that's the case, then the object can reach 1000 meter. Or if the values that we get is equal to 0, means that it's two real and equal roots. It also means that it can reach 1000 meter. But if the value you get is less than 0, means there's no points of intersection, right? No real roots, no point of intersection. So if there's no point of intersection, means the object can never reach 1000 meter above the ground. Yes, and we happen to get negative 35,328, which is less than 0. So there's no 0 point of intersection. Hence, the object cannot reach 1000 meter above the ground. So this is another method of approaching these questions. Right, so for question 7, we are asked to find the range of values of n for which the x squared plus bracket n plus 1 close bracket x plus 4n is more than 11 for all real values of x. So we're going to use this Mr. Poya's 4 steps of problem solving to tackle these questions. So for Mr. Poya's step number 1, it's we need to understand the problem. Right, so what do you mean by understanding the problem? Right, first of all, we understand that the coefficients of x squared is 1. So we're actually dealing with a U-shaped curve. So first step, it's this guy here is a U-shaped curve. Right, and then what is it that we need to find? We know that the answers that we'll be getting is a range of values of n. So it's something to do with inequalities. So this part here, it's dealing with inequalities. So the concepts of solving inequality has to come in really. Okay, and of course also, if you're talking about U-shaped curve, we will think about discriminant, your values for the b squared minus 4ac. So this is how we understand the problem. Then let's go on to step number 2. So step number 2 is we need to think of a plan. So there are a few strategies you can use. So here we will draw a diagram, and of course we also simplify the problem. Okay, so step number 2 is to think of a plan, right? So that what we mentioned earlier on, we'll rearrange the inequalities and we will draw a diagram. So step number 3, which is the most important one, that is we have to carry out the plan. Once we have an idea already, right, then we can carry out the plan. So we have to simplify the inequalities. Right, and we know this is a U-shaped curve, right? And then we draw a diagram. Okay, we draw a diagram. Now the x-axis is where y equals to 0. We're interested in getting y more than 0. So your curve will be entirely above the x-axis. Okay, if you have a curve that's entirely above the x-axis, what do you understand regarding the roots of your equations? Yes, no real roots. And how do you relate no real roots to the values of b squared minus 4ac? Yes, it's less than 0. And this is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to use b squared minus 4ac less than 0. Going to substitute the values for b, for a, and for c. Okay, the only thing you have to watch out for is this guy here. Okay, you have to use these algebraic identities to factorize. So that will gives you n squared plus 2 times n times 1 plus 1. Right, simplify further. Right, and then you factorize it. So simplify already, factorize it, you realize that you end up getting a quadratic inequalities, a quadratic curve where you need to factorize it. And then the coefficients of n squared is 1. So again, it's a U-shaped curve. So we have to draw your U-shaped curve. Write down the x-intercept, which is 5 and 9. We are getting something that it's below the x-axis. We're interested in getting y less than 0. So the range of the values, corresponding range of values of n will be between 5 and 9. Right, so now let's look at step 4. Step 4 is to look back at whether if our solutions are valid or not. So our answers given, the answers that we have found is n to be between 5 and 9. So we can just choose a value. If you were to draw the number line for our answer, okay, we're using empty circle because it does not include 5 and 9. It does not include the two main point. Right, so we're going to choose a value that's between 5 and 9. So we just choose n equals to 8. So if you're going to substitute n equals to 8 into your this portion here, left hand side, let's see if the values we get will be more than 11. Right, so you substitute n to be 8. So you will have x squared plus 9x plus 32. We can complete the square, apply completing the square for it, and you will see that the maximum value, it's minimum value, it's 11 3/4, and 11 3/4 it's more than 11. Right, hence our answer is reasonable because we work out to get some value that it's more than 11 in the end. Right, so this is how you can use Mr. Poya's 4 steps problem sum to tackle question 7. Right, let's come to the last question. What is the concept involved here? The concept involved here is, yes, this word called tangent line. So what is a tangent line? So in the questions we're given a tangent line and a curve. So we need to know the relationship between a curve and a tangent line. How are they connected to each other? So a tangent line will cut a curve or a circle at only one point. Okay, at only one point. It will touches a curve or a circle at only one point. So what is the concept involving here? If it touches only at one point, then we are talking about two real and repeated roots. There's only one point of intersection, yes. That means we're talking about there's only two real equal roots. And how can we relate to the values of b squared minus 4ac? Yes, b squared minus 4ac has to be equal to 0. So this is the concepts involved. So you need all these concepts. If you don't have all these concepts, you can't solve the questions. So how do you build on all these concepts? And that is when you have to go back to the textbook, look at the example, look at the explanation. Okay, you have to look at the explanations, examples, explanations, and then remember all these concepts and apply to similar problem sums. So first thing first, we have a curve and a line. So we're going to form equations in terms of x. Simplify it, bring everything to the left hand side. Alright, you will get a quadratic equations. Write down the values of a, b, and c, which I already advise you to do that. because sometimes by writing now you can minimize the minimize chances of making mistake. So next thing is to substitute into your b squared minus 4ac. Right, I usually like to simplify 4 times 2. First two terms, I usually like to simplify the first two terms before I multiply into the third terms. Okay, it's very important. Don't straight away multiply them together. You may make mistake. So it's best to work out first two terms. So it's 4 times 2, that gives you 8. And then multiply into 5 minus m. Right, so you make 8m the subject. M will be equals to negative 3. Okay, so when m is negative 3, we will have this situation here. Okay, yeah, because it's y equals to 2x squared minus 6x plus 5 is a u-shaped curve. Coefficients of x squared, it's 2 positive. And then your y equals to x plus 5 will become y equals to 2x minus 3. It's a positive gradient. So it will be this first diagram here. Right, so for 12b is a rather challenging question. Why is it challenging? Because these questions you're asked to explain something or show something. So if you look at these questions here, the only definite information given to you here, it's k, it's more than 0. This is the only definite information. Other than that, you are asked to explain that the equation given does not have real roots. Right, so what are the concepts involved here? Okay, like what I've mentioned earlier on, we need to explain or show that the equation does not have real roots. Hence, we should never use b squared minus 4ac less than 0 straight away. We should never use that. So if we don't use that, then what is it that we should do? We need to find the values of b squared minus 4ac. We go on to find this value of b squared minus 4ac, do some manipulations, and show that finally this value is less than 0. Then from there, then we conclude that it has no real roots. So this is the concept involved here. So first thing first is to write down the values for a, b, and c. Right, and then write down b squared minus 4ac. Substitute all your a, b, and c into b squared minus 4ac. And then you need to simplify it. Okay, I'm going to show it to you how you can simplify this. This one basically is just negative 2 square root 2k plus 1 multiplied with another negative 2 square root 2k plus 1. So that means negative 2 times another negative 2, then square root 2k plus 1 multiplied with another square root 2k plus 1. So negative 2 times negative 2 gives you 4. And this guy here, a square root times another square root, the square root sign will be just gone. Just example, if you have square root 2 times square root 2, basically just square root 4, which is just 2 only. Okay, if you have a square root 3 times a square root 3, it's just a square root 9, which is just 3. Okay, then the next step is we simplified it. Simplified it, and finally you end up getting negative 8k minus 28. So at this juncture here, we have to make use of the definite information that's given to you, because you can't proceed without using more information given in the questions. So the definite information given to us is k must be more than 0, so we're going to use it. So if k is more than 0, I'm going to multiply with a negative, multiply with positive 8 first. So you will get 8k more than 0. Multiply with a positive number, inequality sign does not change. But if you multiply with a negative 1 on both sides, then that is where your inequality sign have to change. So this is the part you have to take note. Then we subtract negative 28. Why we want to do that? Because basically we're just trying to get this value. We want to see what is the value for this negative 8k minus 28. Then we realize that negative 8k minus 28 basically is a value that will be strictly less than negative 28. And negative 28 definitely is less than 0. Right, so from there we can conclude that b squared minus 4ac is less than 0. And if b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, the equation does not have real roots. So to summarize what we have done here, number one, if you're asked to do explain or show something, you cannot use b squared minus 4ac less than 0, more than 0, equal to 0 straight away. You can't use it, right? You just go and find the values for b squared minus 4ac and then finally show it that it's either equal to 0, less than 0, more than 0, it's according to what the question asked for. And so in this question here also, we can only make use of definite information. And the definite information is this part here where you're told k is more than 0. Okay, so this complete all the questions in assignment 2.3. This is a rather difficult assignment, so please try the questions on the own and look through the solutions, the explanation, and try that again on the own if you face problem with the working. All right, so happy solving.